Pop culture is defined as a set of shared beliefs, interests, or traditions. But really, it's pop culture that defines who we are as a society. A new exhibit at the Museum of Pop Culture called Massive is taking a deeper look at pop culture and how it's shaped how we see the world. Joining me now is Associate Curator at Mopop, Adiria Johnson, who has been working on this since y'all started designing it, right?
Yeah.
So my first question is kind of like a deeper question about how we think we know what pop culture is.
Yeah.
But do we really know? What is the definition and what is the idea behind this exhibit?
Yeah, so the good thing is that we didn't try to define pop culture explicitly. I think for us, we wanted to make sure that people can understand pop culture as the way we engage, the way that, pop culture is transformative, it's ever changing, and it's global. And so for that, we wanted to make sure we design an exhibit that allows us to engage in how pop culture has made us feel and how we think about it and just the evolution of it. So pop culture for you may be different from me, thinking about our different backgrounds, different experiences, the age difference. So allowing us to kind of engage in pop culture in a way that's transformative and it just connects us in very different ways.
I think that's beautiful, actually. That's lovely. The exhibit is broken up into different sections. What are some of the first examples of pop culture that we saw in history that you're kind of showing in this exhibit?
Yeah, I think I really love that we start off with Dorothy. In the first section, we have, what is pop culture? So we define the really unique ways, that pop culture appears to our guests, our visitors, our staff. So asking people and interrogating folks about what does that mean to them, and to have somebody like Dorothy to set that stage, with just the history of people, how we've engaged with the Wizard of Oz. My personal love is, The Wiz. So thinking about just how those generational differences and how we connect to somebody like Dorothy and just being that precedent for how we engage with that.
Yeah. Well, as we move on down the road to the other exhibits, what are some of the other moments in the exhibit that are important that you wanted to share?
I really do like in our feelings section. I think that's one of the most powerful sections in the exhibit because it really engages guests with how does pop culture make us feel. And oftentimes, pop culture can be confusing, it can be hard. So we have a really nice panel from Barry Johnson, who's a local muralist in Seattle. We kind of highlight, like what does it mean to engage in pop culture in regards to social justice issues? And to counter that, we also talk about things like children's TV and why is it important for children's education to be a thing in regards to pop culture. So we have Waffles and Mochi, and we have Robin the Frog, and then we have a really cool interactive that pairs with that as well. So engaging with how people are choosing to see what they feel. So we have Michael Jackson, we have Barbies and Lizzo on display, so that allows folks to actually play with the artifacts, and you kind of select these colors off this color wheel that we utilize to kind of incite guests to think about like what do these artifacts mean to you and how do they make you feel. And because of that, that interactive, other guests can kind of see what other folks are feeling. So it's a really cool way to engage.
Yeah, I think that's really neat. I saw some of the stuff from the pictures on the website, the interactive stuff, and you can kind of choose which decade you want to talk about.
Yeah,
oh, that's
so
neat.
That's our moment section.
Okay.
That's my favorite section. It was super challenging to put together, but we have about over 400 moments in pop culture, starting as early as 1920 to literally 2023.
Wow.
And so you can kind of toggle through the different decades, and each decade has about 400 moments. So thinking about how those decades actually kind of connect to who you are. So you can choose a year such as 1992, the year I was born, and see really unique things, like the rise of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or the first episode of The Simpsons. We're looking at, when baseball was actually first, broadcasted. So think about all those really unique moments that brought us together in a really cool living room that we designed. So it allows us to kind of think about how we've received pop culture over the years.
That is so fun.
Yeah.
How did you pick? I mean, that must have been such a crazy. So there's 400 things for each. Like, how did you even pick?
It started with the question, like, what was so special about this year? And we broke it off through different decades. So I think for me, I wanted to ask questions like, what unique foods came out? What are these really unique TV moments? And we had something so special, just thinking about when Michael Jackson, made that first moonwalk across the stage from Motown 25. So thinking about like what kind of reshaped pop culture, what kind of changed the way that we think about certain things like music and movies and things like that. And I think what's really, really cool is that people can kind of share moments from their childhood and kind of share that with their kids.
Yes!
And kind of reflect on those moments that were so cool to you. So I think it's a really good way, again, to kind of engage in how pop culture is transformative, because we see those transitions and those evolutions, with those decades.
Well, and it's interesting too, because, we're seeing our kids start to like things that were ours.
Yeah.
And my son is obsessed with Michael Jackson now. My daughter is like, hey, did you hear about this thing? I'm like, yeah, like 30 years ago. So it's a mix. I love that. It's a mix of nostalgia, but also what makes us who we are.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of really cool things, because I saw you mentioned Lizzo. You have a costume from Lizzo, a costume from Beyonce.
Yeah.
Where did you get a lot of these artifacts from?
Yeah, so I think the hardest thing about working in a museum, like MoPOP, is the fact that we're collecting artifacts that aren't made past production. And sometimes that means, collectors reaching out to us that they have really cool things that they want to donate and give to us. Sometimes we're, challenging, through things like auctions. And then again, we're super grateful for, our bequest from the Paul Allen Foundation. So some of those things, are within the exhibit, but I think the really great thing about it is that we have so many different ways that we acquire artifacts. So it's a challenge, but it's also really cool to see what people have to offer.
So before we started this interview, I asked you off camera, how long does it run for? And you're like, forever. So this is kind of now a new exhibit that almost defines the museum, right? Yeah,
so it's one of our long-term exhibits. So we designed it as kind of this introduction to who we are as MoPOP. We never had an exhibit that kind of talked about pop culture.
Right.
So for us to have this exhibit to be that first thing that you see when you climb up our stairs, it allows folks to engage with pop culture in really unique ways. And one thing I love about the gallery is that whatever artifacts that we swap out within the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 6 months, we're going to always have those conversations, but they can be applied to different artifacts.
Neat.
Yeah.
I think that's really what, I think that's such a key piece to add to the museum, because I think everyone knows MoPOP is the place to go to see all the cool things and the old costumes or the this or the, but this is something so great that we can now go see and ask that question, right?
Yeah.
Because it starts conversation.
Yeah, like us, we're having a conversation now, but I think with Massive, it's an evolving gallery. So, when I'm no longer at MoPOP, hopefully that the next curator can add certain things that happen in 2024 or 2030. Just thinking about the ways in which that gallery starts these conversations that we can always have, as just time progresses.
Kind of like a time capsule of who we are and where we're going.
Yeah, I think so.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure talking to you.
Great.
Go check out the exhibit. You are going to love it. I know I can't wait.